World Report, your compass to African news and the world beyond. I'm Fathiya Mohammed Noor in the headlines. More than 140 people killed in Russia's capital, Moscow, after concert attack. Senegal opposition candidate Bassirou Faye wins the presidential election. UN Security Council passes resolution calling for Gaza's ceasefire. Al-Shabaab launches deadly attack on military base in Somalia. And Malawi declares state of disaster over drought rout by El Nino. Welcome to the program. Now, more than 140 people have been killed in Russia's capital, Moscow, after a concert attack. Over 100 more have been injured. Assailants got into a large concert hall in Moscow last Friday and spread the crowd with gunfire, killing over 140 people, injuring more than 100 and setting fire to the venue. This attack comes days after Vladimir Putin was re-elected to presidency. 4 men accused of the attack appeared before a Moscow court on Sunday, showing signs of severe beatings. One appeared to be barely conscious during the hearing. According to the court statements, the two of the suspects accepted their guilt in the assault, though the men's conditions raised concerns about whether they were speaking freely. Moving to Senegal now, and opposition candidate Bassirou Faye wins the presidential election. According to the Electoral Commission, provisional results showed Bassirou Faye with 53.7% and Amadou Ba from the current ruling coalition with 36.2% based on tallies from 90% of polling stations in the first round vote. Ba and Sall both congratulated Faye. They hailed the outcome as a win for Senegal, whose reputation as one of West Africa's most stable democracies took a hit when Sall postponed the vote. A peaceful transition of power in Senegal would mark a boost for democracy in West Africa, where there have been 8 military coups since 2020. To the Israel-Palestinian conflict now, the UN Security Council has called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. It demanded the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. It is the first time the Council has called for a ceasefire since the war began in October after several failed attempts. The move by the US signals growing divergence between it and its ally Israel over Israel's offensive in Gaza. In a statement from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office, said the U.S. had abandoned its previous position, which had directly linked a ceasefire to hostage release. The statement said this harmed efforts to release hostages by giving Hamas hope it could use international pressure on Israel to achieve a ceasefire without freeing the captives. It also said Mr. Netanyahu had decided to cancel meetings between an Israel delegation and U.S. officials in Washington that was scheduled for this week. Israel's defense minister said Israel would not stop the war in Gaza while hostages were still being held there. The Palestinian representative to the UN, Riyad Mansour, welcomed the resolution but said it was overdue. To Somalia now, an Islamist group Al-Shabaab has killed at least 17 people in a deadly attack. The Basli base in the Lower Shabelle region in the country's southwest was briefly occupied by the attackers, security officials and the group said. 7 Somalia soldiers, including the commander of the base, and 10 Al-Shabaab fighters were killed in the fighting. According to some residents in the area, Al-Shabaab also burned military vehicles and took others during the assault. The Al-Qaeda allied group has been fighting for nearly 2 decades, aiming to topple Somalia's central government and establish its own rule based on its strict interpretation of Islamic Sharia law. Malawi has declared a state of disaster following El Nino floods in the country. The president now calling for humanitarian assistance of at least $200 million. President Lazarus Chakwera announced that 2 million farming households have been affected by the El Nino-induced dry spells and need for food. Around 600,000 metric tons of food aid are needed. Malawi has been repeatedly hit by weather extremes in recent years. Neighboring Zambia declared a national disaster in late February. On the big story this week, we focus on the terrorist attack that happened in Moscow, Russia. Four gunmen on Friday night stormed the Crocus City Hall in Granokorsk, a northern Moscow suburb, and began firing on at least 6,000 people who were attending a rock concert. The attackers also set fires which engulfed the venue and caused the roof to collapse.
There have been some terrorist attacks before, but they did not threaten the country as such. They are mostly a nuisance. They have nuisance value. But they do tend to unite the people. And even if they were questioning some things, they would rally together and say, let's deal with this now, and we can worry about the differences afterwards. But as to a terrorist attack threatening the state, it doesn't happen. It's an episode, an incident of a nuisance value, but would they change the state thinking and doing whatever it's doing? Rarely, but it does actually encourage state officials to be a little more vigilant, and if they are doing something somewhere else, then to be more vigorous in doing that and move on. But the terrorist attack does not stop the state from doing whatever it is that it is attempting to do, or has embarked on doing.
Officials have suggested, without evidence, that the attackers were being helped by Ukraine, and Kyiv had prepared a window to allow them to cross the border and escape into its territory. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky on Sunday rejected the claims, and his military intelligence directorate said it was absurd.
The Russians are saying the Ukrainians are involved. What we noticed as soon as there was that attack, there was immediate effort to deny any Ukrainian involvement immediately, before there was any claim to the effect that they might be involved, because it is a thinking thing, that because they do want the Russians embarrassed, so the possibility of the Ukrainians being involved and the Americans being involved is there, and it's not far-fetched, given what is known in the past. The possibility that the Russians are also looking for some scapegoat or something like that is also there. The information is not all out. The Russians claim that they caught people who are on their way to Ukraine, and with some arrangement being made for that. It cannot be dismissed.
7 other people have been arrested in Russia suspected of aiding the attack. The U.S. warned Moscow earlier this month of a possible attack in Russia aimed at large gatherings before issuing a public advisory to citizens in the country.
Yes, there was information that there will be an attack on a large place where people assemble, and that Krakow place, a theater that can hold 7,000 people, that was a big target, for the people who they planned it very well, whoever it is. And they did their homework. So in that sense, then the Russians were caught almost napping. But then the way things operate, even if the information is there, they have this problem of deciding whether it's credible or not and exactly where it was going to happen. And the Russians are not the only ones who are guilty of that failure. The Americans were caught flat-footed, not once, but many times. And they said, but the information was there. How come you didn't touch? So there's nothing unusual about this that the Russians do not have, despite some information of the likely attack.
ISIS claimed the bombing of aircraft belonging to Russians over Egypt in 2015, killing all the 224 people on board. It also claimed a 2017 bomb attack on the St. Petersburg metro, which killed 15 people. The Islamic State group, or IS, said it carried out the attack at Crocus City Hall and posted video evidence.
The ISIS claimed that it did it, and since they want the credit, give it to them. But it's deeper than that, the way things are. And the interaction between the ISIS, the Americans, and the Russians over time have been up and down. So whatever it is that they are grumbling about now, and it's very hard to say that it's this ISIS has many factions. It has many splinter groups. You say that it initially was part of the Al-Qaeda, that later on they split into something else, operating mainly in Syria and Iraq. So they claim they want publicity, which is understandable. But the main question is, are they alone? Or is it something else? And given the past interactions of the various institutions or terror groups, mainly in the Middle East, you can never rule anything out. They have been known to work on all sides. So at one time they are with the Americans, at that time they are against the Americans, or they are with the Russians, then they are against the Russians. It depends on the mood of a particular time.
Moscow's Basmani district court ordered that the men, all of whom were identified in the media as citizens of Tajikistan, be held in custody until May 22nd, pending investigation and trial. On Election Pulse this week, we take a look at the Chad elections. The election authorities have cleared at least 10 presidential candidates to run in the long-awaited elections. They include nominations of interim President Mohamed Idris Deby and the country's recently appointed Prime Minister Souke Masra. The Central African nation's Constitutional Council announced the list, which showed that outspoken opposition figures Nasur Ibrahim Ngui Kursomi and Rakis Ahmed Saleh will be barred from contesting the elections. The council said that the nominations of interim President Mohamed Idris Deby and the country's recently appointed Prime Minister Souke Masra had been accepted. So who are the two contenders? Mohamed Idris Deby Itno was born on 4th April 1984. He is a four-star general, currently serving as the transitional president of Chad. He came into power as the president of the transitional military on 20th April 2021, when his father, the late President Idris Deby, died in the battlefield in action while commanding troops in the northern Chad offensive. He also served as the second in command of the military for the Chadian intervention in northern Mali. The second contender is Souke Masra. Souke Masra was born on 30th August 1983. He is an economist and a politician who served as the Prime Minister of Chad from beginning of the year, 1st January 2024. He formerly worked for the Africa Development Bank. In 2018, he founded Les Transformateurs, a political party that became part of the opposition in Chad. Masra lived in exile in the US after the 2022 Chad elections, but returned in 2023 ahead of the constitutional referendum and later became Prime Minister. The Central African nation is scheduled to hold the first round of presidential election on May 6th and second round on June 22nd, with provisional results in July. The elections are part of a transition back to democracy from rule by Chad's military government, which is one of several currently in power in West and Central Africa. It is the first time in Chad's history that a president and a prime minister will face each other in a presidential poll. And on the entertainment scene this week, the world mourns the comedian actor from Nigeria, Amaechi Muonagor. According to local media, he died on Sunday after suffering kidney failure and was on dialysis. Last week, Mr. Muonagor pleaded for financial assistance in a video posted to social media to help him pay for a kidney transplant abroad. During his career, Muonagor appeared in dozens of films, including Aki and Popo, one of his famous roles, where he played the father of two mischief-making of exuberant teenagers. He was nominated for the 2017 Africa Magic Viewers' Choice Awards for Best Actor.
Egg. Yes, interesting. You know, in my life, I have never seen snake egg at all.
On the parting clips this week, India celebrates the Holi festival globally. Millions of Indians are celebrating Holi, known as the Festival of Colors, at home and abroad. The festival celebrates the beginning of spring and the victory of good over evil. It is held on the last full moon day of the lunar month. The festival sees people smearing bright colors on friends and family and offering prayers. As part of the festivities, bonfires are lit the evening before Holi in the belief that they will destroy the bad so that good can triumph. Huge processions are held in several parts of the country to mark the festival. People dance and sing and hold fists. A public holiday is observed and schools are shut as children and adults devote the day to colorful celebrations. On that note, we wrap up the World Report this week. Remember, if you have any comments or queries, you can reach me on my social media at Noor Fatia. Thank you for watching.